The vast emptiness of the Grand Canyon has a way of playing tricks on your mind. You hear things that aren't there, see shadows move in your peripheral vision. But what I saw that evening, perched on a ridge overlooking the endless chasm, was no trick of the light. It was real, and it still haunts my waking moments. I'd been hiking for 3 days, pushing myself to reach a remote viewpoint known only to a few seasoned backpackers. The sun was beginning its slow descent, painting the canyon walls in fiery shades of orange and purple. The silence was profound, broken only by the whisper of the wind. That's when I first felt it. A prickling sensation on the back of my neck, the kind that tells you you're being watched. I scanned the area, my hand instinctively going to the bear spray on my hip. Nothing, just rocks, hardy desert shrubs, and the immense, beautiful void. I tried to shake it off, blaming fatigue and the isolation. I set up my small, one-person tent, my back to the cliff's edge, and started preparing a simple meal. The feeling of being watched intensified. It felt like a physical pressure, a weight in the air. As dusk settled, the canyon transformed. Shapes became indistinct, and the wind began to carry strange sounds. It started as a low whistle, almost like a bird, but it was off-key, unnatural. Then, a different sound joined it. A soft, rhythmic scraping. Scrape. Pause. Scrape. Pause. It sounded like something dragging itself across the rock, just out of sight. My heart hammered against my ribs. I turned off my headlamp, hoping to blend into the darkness. Peering over the top of a boulder, I looked towards the source of the sound. And then I saw it. Silhouetted against the last vestiges of twilight was a figure. At first, I thought it was a coyote or a large fox, but it was all wrong. Its limbs were too long, its movements jerky and disjointed. It moved on all fours, but not like any animal I'd ever seen. It was gaunt, its skin stretched tight over a skeletal frame, and its head was low to the ground, sniffing the air. It was sniffing my trail. Panic seized me, cold and absolute. This wasn't an animal. The local legends, the campfire stories I'd always dismissed as folklore, flooded my mind. Skinwalker. The word itself felt like a curse. The creature paused, its head snapping up, even from a distance. In the deepening gloom, I felt its gaze lock onto my hiding spot. It didn't have eyes that reflected the moonlight. It had dark, empty sockets. It seemed to drink the light around them. Then, it stood up. It unfolded itself, limb by limb, rising onto 2 long, spindly legs. It was impossibly tall, maybe 7 or 8 feet. A nightmarish caricature of a human form. It took a step, then another. Its gait, a grotesque, lurching jump. The scraping sound was its feet dragging on the stone. It was coming for me. I scrambled back from the boulder, my breath catching in my throat. I couldn't run. To my back was a 1,000-foot drop. To my front was that thing. My tent seemed like a pathetic, useless shield. I fumbled for the zipper, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grasp it. Idobin seed zipping it shut, as if a thin layer of nylon could offer any real protection. I lay flat, my face pressed against the cold floor, trying to make myself as small as possible. The scraping stopped. The silence that followed was worse than any noise. I could hear my own blood roaring in my ears. Was it gone? Did it give up? A new sound started, right outside my tent. A soft, wet sniffing. It was circling my tiny shelter, its foul breath fogging the fabric. I held my breath, praying it wouldn't find the zipper. Then, a voice whispered. A dry, rasping sound that was a twisted mockery of a human voice. It was my own voice. Cold out here, it rasped, perfectly mimicking my tone from a video call I'd had with my brother before the trip. Should have brought a warmer jacket. Ice flooded my veins. It was using my voice. Eat. Kine. It was toying with me. It scraped a long, sharp nail down the side of the tent, the fabric groaning in protest. I squeezed my eyes shut, waiting for the inevitable. Then it spoke again, this time in the voice of my mother. "Honey, are you okay? Open up." "It's me." The tone was filled with concern, a perfect imitation of her love. It was a Billy's psychological torture. A sob escaped my lips. And the thing outside chuckled, a dry, rattling sound like stones in a gourd. It knew it had broken me. The scraping continued, moving away from the tent. I risked a peek through the mesh window. It was standing at the edge of the cliff, its back to me. Its long, emaciated form, silhouetted against the starry sky. It seemed to be looking down into the abyss. For a moment, a crazy thought hit me. Maybe it would just leave. But then it began to change. Its body contorted, bones snapping and reforming with sickening crunches. Its form shrank, fur sprouting from its pale skin. In a matter of seconds, the lanky, horrifying humanoid was gone. In its place stood a massive hawk, larger than any eye had ever seen. Its head swiveled, its sharp, predatory eyes fixing on my tent for one final, terrifying moment. Then, with a powerful beat of its enormous wings, it launched itself from the cliff and soared silently into the blackness of the canyon. I didn't sleep. I stayed huddled in my tent until the first rays of sun crested the horizon. A promise of safety I barely dared to believe. I packed my gear in a frenzy, not even stopping for water. I practically ran the entire way back to the trailhead, constantly looking over my shoulder, my ears straining for the sound of giant wings or the scrape of feet on rock. I never went back to the Grand Canyon. Sometimes, when the wind whistles through the eaves of my house at night, I hear it. That off-key, unnatural sound. And I remember the thing on the ridge, the thing that wore my voice and stood on the edge of the world. Some places hold secrets older and darker than the rock they're carved from, and I was lucky to escape with just the memory. I know it's still out there, hunting in the vast, empty spaces, waiting for the next lonely hiker. The storm hit us without warning, a furious, black wall of wind and rain that turned the desert road into a river of mud. There were 5 of us in my old Jeep. Me, my brother Liam, his girlfriend Chloe, and our 2 friends, Maya and Ben. We were on our way back from a camping trip, miles from the nearest town. The wipers couldn't keep up, and visibility dropped to 0. Then, through the blinding downpour, a faint light. It was a house, a single-story silhouette against the chaotic sky. It looked old, abandoned even, but any shelter was better than being stranded. We pulled into the overgrown driveway, the engine sputtering its last breath before dying completely. The 5 of us scrambled out, huddling together as we ran for the porch. The wind howled, ripping at our jackets. Ben, ever the practical one, tried the doorknob. It turned. The door creaked open into a dusty, cavernous living room. The air inside was thick with the smell of decay and something else. Something musky and wild. But it was dry. We all piled in, slamming the door shut against the tempest. A collective sigh of relief went through the group. We used our phone flashlights to explore. The place was a time capsule of neglect. Furniture lay draped in white sheets like ghosts, and cobwebs hung like macabre chandeliers. In the center of the living room, a stone fireplace stood cold and imposing. Liam found a stack of dry logs beside it, and soon we had a small, crackling fire going. The flickering light pushed back the shadows, making the strange house feel a little less menacing. We gathered around the warmth, shedding our wet gear and laughing about our terrible luck. It was Chloe who first noticed something odd. We were huddled close, sharing a bag of trail mix, our only remaining food. She was looking around the circle, her brow furrowed. "Hey," she said, her voice a little shaky. "This is a silly question, but did we ever count how many of us came in?" We all looked at each other, a little confused. "There's 5 of us. Chloe," Liam said, putting an arm around her. "You, me, my brother, Maya, and Ben." She nodded, but didn't look convinced. "I know. I feel like there's someone else here." We dismissed it as nerves. The storm, the creepy house, it was enough to put anyone on edge. To lighten the mood, Ben started telling a ghost story. It was a classic tale of a haunted mansion, but his voice kept getting drowned out by the storm and another sound, a faint scratching. It seemed to be coming from the hallway that led deeper into the house. Probably just rats, Maya whispered, trying to sound brave, but she pulled her knees up to her chest. The scratching grew louder, more rhythmic. It wasn't the frantic scuttling of a rodent. It sounded deliberate. Scratch. Pause. Scratch. Pause. It moved from the hallway to the wall behind the fireplace, right behind where we were sitting. A cold dread began to seep into our little circle of warmth. Ben's story died on his lips. We all sat in silence, listening. The scratching stopped. Then, a low guttural sound rumbled from the chimney above us. It wasn't the wind. It was deep, throaty, and sounded almost like a word being choked out. Panic set in. Liam grabbed the heavy iron poker from the fireplace. His knuckles white, we all stood up, backing away from the hearth. Our flashlights darting around the room. The shadows danced and writhed, playing tricks on our eyes. Every corner seemed to hold a lurking figure. Then, from the darkness of the hallway, a shape emerged. It was tall and gaunt, moving with an unnatural, jerky gait. It wasn't one of us. My heart hammered against my ribs. The figure stepped into the firelight, and a collective gasp escaped our lips. It looked almost human. Its skin was stretched tight over a skeletal frame, its limbs too long, its joints bending at impossible angles. But the eyes were what truly terrified me. They were dark, soulless pits that seemed to suck the light and warmth from the room, and they were fixed on us with a predatory intelligence. It let out another sound, a wet, clicking noise from deep in its throat, mimicking the sound of our laughter from earlier, but twisted and grotesque. It was mocking us. This was the old legends my grandfather used to tell me flooded my mind. Imitators, creatures that stole voices and forms. They were supposed to be just stories, but the thing standing before us was sickeningly real. "Don't look it in the eyes," I screamed, remembering my grandfather's warning. The creature took a lurching step forward. Liam swung the poker, but the creature dodged with impossible speed, its long arms shooting out and grabbing the iron rod. It wrenched the poker from Liam's grasp and bent the solid metal in half as if it were a twig, before tossing it into a dark corner. We broke. Pure, instinctual terror took over. We scattered, running blindly. I grabbed Maya's hand and pulled her toward the back of the house, away from the front door where the creature stood. We fumbled our way into what looked like a kitchen, slamming a rickety door behind us. We could hear the others screaming, the sound of furniture being thrown, and that awful, clicking mimicry. We braced ourselves against the door, our combined weight barely holding it as something slammed against it from the other side. The wood splintered. "There's window," Maya yelled, pointing her shaking light at a small window over a grimy sink. It was our only chance. I scrambled onto the counter, struggling with the rusted latch. The pounding on the door intensified, punctuated by a sound like claws dragging down the wood. The latch finally gave, and I pushed the window open. Cold, wet air flooded in. I helped Maya through first, then scrambled out after her, landing hard in the mud outside. The storm was still raging, but it felt safer than the house. We didn't wait for the others. We couldn't. We just ran. We ran through the mud in the driving rain, not daring to look back. Behind us, a scream tore through the night, a scream that was cut off abruptly, replaced by that horrifying, clicking laughter. It echoed in our ears, chasing us as we fled into the desert darkness. We never saw Liam, Chloe, or Ben again. Sometimes, when the wind howls just right, I can still hear it. That awful, mocking laughter. And I think about that circle around the fire. Chloe was right. There was someone else with us the whole time. It hadn't followed us in. It was already there, waiting. We never counted how many came in, but that thing, it had been counting us. We were a group of 5 who entered that house, but I'm sure, in its mind, the count was 6. We just didn't see the last one inside until it was too late. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, Be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more Tales from the Dark. Stay safe out there. The night air in Amarillo was crisp, the kind that bites at your cheeks but feels good in your lungs. My buddies, Jake, Chris, and I were out in the middle of nowhere, just a flat expanse under a sky packed with stars. We'd built a massive bonfire, the flames clawing at the darkness, sending a column of sparks up into the endless Texas sky. We were laughing, telling stupid jokes, the crackle of the fire our only soundtrack. It was perfect. That's when Jake, mid-sentence, just stopped. His eyes were fixed on something beyond the ring of firelight. He pointed, his hand trembling slightly. "What is that?" he whispered. Chris and I followed his gaze. Out in the pitch black where our fire's glow couldn't reach was a silhouette. It was tall, unnaturally so, and it wasn't moving, just standing there, watching us. A chill, entirely different from the night air, snaked its way down my spine. The figure was too far to make out any details, but its shape was all wrong. It was vaguely human, but the proportions were distorted, like a caricature drawn by a madman. The legs were too long. The arms dangled almost to its knees. We all fell silent. The only sound was the fire, which now seemed less like a comfort and more like a beacon, announcing our presence to whatever was out there. "It's probably just a weird cactus or a fence post," Chris said, trying to sound brave, but his voice was tight. None of us believed him. "A fence post doesn't have a head that slowly tilts to one side," as we watched it horrified. Its head swiveled with a slow, deliberate motion, as if it was studying us. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't an animal. This wasn't a person. This was something else entirely. "Let's just ignore it," I said, my voice barely a whisper. We tried. We really did. We turned back to the fire, attempting to pick up our conversation, but the words died in our throats. The feeling of being watched was suffocating. Every few seconds, one of us would glance back out into the darkness. It was still there, and it seemed closer. I couldn't be sure at first. The dancing firelight played tricks on your eyes, but then Jake confirmed my fear. "Guys, it's definitely closer." We all looked again. He was right. The figure was now at the very edge of the fire's reach. Still a silhouette, but a larger, more defined one. We could almost make out the texture of... something. It wasn't skin, and it wasn't fur. It looked like dry, stretched hide pulled taut over a skeletal frame. The air grew heavy, thick with a palpable sense of dread. The silence was broken by a sound that made my blood run cold. It was a soft, wet click, followed by another and another. It was coming from the figure. It sounded like someone slowly, deliberately, clicking their tongue against the roof of their mouth. Click, click, click. It was a rhythmic, hypnotic sound that was profoundly unsettling. Chris grabbed a thick log from the woodpile, holding it like a club. "Who's there?" he yelled, his voice cracking. The clicking stopped. The figure remained motionless for a long, agonizing moment. Then it took a step. Its movement was jarring and unnatural. It didn't walk like a human. It seemed to unfold itself, one long, spindly limb at a time, moving with a jerky, stop-motion quality that defied physics. It took another step, bringing it just into the faint orange glow of the fire. And that's when we saw its face, or rather, the lack of one. There were no eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just a smooth, pale expanse of what looked like hardened leather. But we knew it was looking at us. We could feel its focus, a malevolent, hungry attention that made the hair on my arms stand up. Then, from that blank face, a sound emerged. It started as a low gurgle, then rose in pitch until it was a perfect imitation of Jake's laugh from earlier. The exact same boisterous, hearty laugh we'd heard not 20 minutes ago. It was a perfect mimicry, but utterly devoid of humor. It was a dead, hollow sound, an echo from a nightmare. Jake let out a choked sob. That was it for us. We didn't need any more convincing. We scrambled for the truck, tripping over each other in our haste. The sound of that horrifying, stolen laughter followed us. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely fit the key into the ignition. Through the windshield, I could see the thing. It was moving faster now, loping towards us with that same disjointed, horrifying gait. Its long arms swung wildly, its blank face a beacon of pure terror in the darkness. The engine roared to life. I slammed the truck into reverse, not caring what was behind us, and spun the wheel. The headlights cut a swath through the night, landing directly on the figure. For a split second, it was fully illuminated. It was covered in patchy, mangy brown hide, stretched so tight over its bones that they threatened to burst through. It had no face, but as the light hit it, the smooth surface seemed to ripple, and a dark, gaping maw opened where a mouth should be, letting out a shriek that was a twisted blend of a coyote's howl and human screams. I stomped on the gas, and we shot forward, leaving the bonfire and that thing behind us. We didn't slow down. We didn't speak. I drove like a man possessed, my eyes glued to the rearview mirror. For miles, I could see the faint orange glow of our abandoned fire. And for a terrifyingly long time, I thought I could see a tall, thin silhouette standing beside it, watching Warsay go. We never went back to that spot. We never talked about what happened that night. Not really. But sometimes, when it's quiet, I can still hear it. That soft, wet, clicking sound, and the echo of my friends' stolen laughter, coming from the darkness. Thanks for watching. If you have your own stories, I'd love to hear them in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Stay safe out there. Have you ever felt a pair of eyes on you when you're all alone? Not just the feeling of being watched, but the chilling certainty that something is lurking just beyond your sight, waiting. This happened to me a few years back, during a trip to Corpus Christi, Texas. I was there for a photography project, trying to capture the raw, untouched beauty of the coastline. I'd spent most of my days near the water, but one evening I decided to explore a more secluded area, a nature preserve just outside the city limits. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, and I was completely lost in the moment, snapping photos of the twisted live oak trees and dense thickets of brush. That's when I heard it, a faint rustling in the bushes to my right. At first, I brushed it off. It was probably just a deer or a raccoon. This was a nature preserve, after all. I lowered my camera and listened. The rustling stopped. I waited a moment, then raised my camera again. As soon as I looked through the viewfinder, the sound started again. Closer this time. It wasn't the sound of a small animal scurrying through the undergrowth. It was heavier, more deliberate, like something large was trying to move quietly, but failing. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I slowly panned my camera toward the sound, my heart starting to pound against my ribs. The light was fading fast, and the shadows were growing long and distorted. Through my lens, I could just make out a dark shape in a thicket of mesquite, partially obscured by leaves. It was big, much bigger than a coyote or a bobcat. I held my breath, trying to get a clearer view. The shape was vaguely humanoid, but its proportions were all wrong. The limbs seemed too long, the torso too thin. It was crouched, low to the ground, almost unnaturally so. My logical mind was screaming at me to leave, to run back to my car. But the photographer and me, the part that craves the unknown, was frozen in place. I needed to see what it was. I zoomed in as far as my lens would allow. The image was grainy in the low light, but I could make out something. It wasn't an animal. It looked like a person, but twisted and malformed. Its head was tilted at an impossible angle, and as I watched, it slowly began to rise. It moved with a jerky, unnatural motion, like a marionette being pulled by unseen strings. That's when the smell hit me. A foul, coppery scent, mixed with the smell of damp earth and decay. It was so strong it made my eyes water. The figure was almost fully upright now, and it was tall, easily over 7 feet. It was still partially hidden by the branches, but I could see enough to know this was something deeply wrong. It had no discernible features, just a dark, gaunt silhouette against the dying light. Panic finally took over. I ripped the camera from my eye and scrambled backward, tripping over a root and falling hard on my back. The air was knocked out of my lungs, and for a terrifying second, I couldn't move. I just lay there, staring up at the darkening sky, listening. The rustling in the bushes had stopped. There was only silence. A heavy, oppressive silence that was far more terrifying than the noise had been. I pushed myself up, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get a grip on the ground. I didn't dare look back toward the thicket. I just ran. I ran faster than I've ever run in my life. Branches whipping at my face, my lungs burning. I didn't stop until I burst out of the tree line and into the gravel parking lot. My car was the only one there. I fumbled for my keys, my fingers feeling like clumsy sausages. I finally got the door open, threw myself inside, and locked Italiano. I sat there for a full minute, gasping for air, my heart threatening to explode out of my chest. I forced myself to look back at the edge of the woods. There was nothing there, just the dark, silent trees. Was it my imagination? Had the fading light and the isolation played tricks on my mind? I wanted to believe that. I really did. But I couldn't shake the image of that tall, distorted figure, or the memory of that sickening smell. I started the car and peeled out of the parking lot. Not looking back again, I drove straight back to my hotel, locked the door, and pushed a chair up against it. I didn't sleep at all that night. Every creak of the building, every distant sound, sent a fresh wave of terror through me. The next morning, I packed my bags and checked out. I couldn't get out of Corpus Christi fast enough. I didn't even stop to develop the photos I'd taken. For weeks, I tried to convince myself it was a prank or a trick of the light, but I knew what I saw. Back home, I finally got the courage to look at the pictures from that evening. I clicked through them one by one, my hands clammy. Most were just beautiful, eerie landscapes. Then I got to the last few shots, the ones I took of the thicket. I zoomed in, pixel by pixel. There it was. Grainy, distorted, but undeniably. A tall, dark figure, with limbs too long and a head tilted at an unnatural angle. It wasn't just a shadow, it was real. I'd heard stories before, local legends from the Southwest, about creatures that can mimic human form, things that hunt in the twilight hours. They call them I always dismissed them as folklore, campfire tales meant to scare tourists. But after that night in Corpus Christi, I'm not so sure. Sometimes, late at night, when I'm alone, I can still smell that foul, coppery scent on the air. And I can't help but wonder if the thing I saw in the bushes that night followed me home. I never went back to that preserve. And I don't think I'll ever go hiking alone at dusk again, because some things are better left unseen, and some legends are more than just stories. So if you ever find yourself in the wilds of South Texas and you hear a rustling in the bushes, don't wait to see what it is. Just run. Thanks for listening to my story. If you've had a similar encounter, share it in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more chilling tales. Stay safe out there. The city lights always made me feel safe, a concrete fortress against the dark. But that illusion shattered one Tuesday night. I was working late, the only one left in my high-rise office, staring out the window at the sprawling cityscape below. My eyes caught movement in the alley across the street. It was a stray dog, I thought at first. Its movements jerky and unnatural. It staggered under a flickering streetlight, its limbs bending at angles that made my stomach churn. It wasn't a dog. It was too large, too thin, its fur patchy and matted. As I watched, a shiver tracing its way down my spine, the thing collapsed. It lay still for a moment, and I almost breathed a sigh of relief, thinking it was over. Then, its body began to contort. Bones cracked with the sound I could almost feel through the thick glass of the window. Its form lengthened, twisted, and reshaped itself. It was like watching a time-lapse of something deeply, fundamentally wrong. In seconds, the creature stood up, no longer a four-legged animal, but a bipedal figure, tall and gaunt, draped in what looked like rags. It turned its head towards my building, and even from 20 floors up, I felt a jolt of pure terror as its eyes, glowing with a faint, predatory light, seemed to lock onto mine. I scrambled back from the window, my heart hammering against my ribs. My mind raced, trying to process what I had just seen. It was impossible. A trick of the light, a hallucination brought on by exhaustion. I peeked back out, my curiosity warring with my fear. The figure was gone. The alley was empty, save for the flickering streetlight casting long, dancing shadows. I tried to calm myself down, telling myself it was nothing. I packed my bag, my hands shaking so badly I could barely zip it shut. The walk to the elevator felt like a mile. Every shadow seemed to stretch and move. Every distant sound from the building's old pipes sounded like scratching claws. As I stepped out of the building onto the street, the cool night air did little to calm my frayed nerves. The city was still alive. Cars rushing by, people walking, laughing, completely oblivious to the horror I had witnessed. I started walking towards the subway station, forcing myself to blend in with the crowd, to feel the safety of their numbers. But the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. I kept glancing over my shoulder, my eyes scanning every face in the crowd. Was it one of them? Could it look like a normal person? The thought was paralyzing. Then, I saw him. Across the street, standing under a theater marquee, was a man. He was unnervingly still, a stark contrast to the bustling crowd around him. He was tall, thin, and wore a long, dark coat. His face was in shadow, but I didn't need to see it. I just knew. It was the same figure from the alley. He slowly lifted his head, and his gaze met mine across the 4 lanes of traffic. There was no mistaking those eyes. That same cold, predatory glow. A wave of nausea washed over me. He took a step off the curb, moving into the street. Cars swerved and honked, but he walked as if they weren't there. His movements fluid and unnervingly graceful. I broke into a run, pushing through the crowds, not daring to look back. I didn't know where I was going, just away. I ducked into a side street, then another, my lungs burning. The sounds of the city faded into a dull roar in my ears, replaced by the frantic beat of my own heart. I thought I'd lost him. I slowed, leaning against a brick wall, gasping for air. That's when I heard it. A soft, scraping sound coming from the other end of the alley. I froze. Peeking around the edge of a dumpster, my blood ran cold. It was there, but it was changing again. Its form was shifting, becoming smaller, more compact. The long coat seemed to melt away as its limbs shortened and its spine curved. In the dim light, I watched in abject horror as it transformed into the shape of a woman I recognized. She lived in my apartment building. A friendly, older lady. I'd shared the elevator with Jess this morning. She smiled at me every day. The creature now wearing her face, her clothes, her exact form, stood up and dusted itself off. It looked around, its movements a perfect imitation of the real woman. And then it started walking purposefully out of the alley, heading in the direction of my apartment. I was trapped in a nightmare. It knew who I was. It knew where I lived. And now, it was wearing a familiar face. A disguise that would let it get close, let it walk right up to my door. I couldn't go home. I couldn't call the police. What would I even say? I stayed hidden in that alley for what felt like hours, shaking uncontrollably. The city no longer felt like a fortress. It felt like a hunting ground, and I was the prey. The crowds of people were no longer a comfort. They were a forest where the predator could hide, wearing any face it chose. I eventually made my way to a 24-hour coffee shop, sinking into a booth in the far corner, my back to the wall. I've been here ever since, watching the door, scrutinizing every person who walks in. The sun is coming up, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. But the dawn brings no relief. How do you escape something that can be anyone? It could be the person sitting across from me, the barista, the man reading the paper. Every smile seems like a threat. Every stranger a potential monster. It's been 2 days since I've been home. I don't know if I'll ever go back. The figure changed its face and ran into the downtown, and in doing so, it stole my world, replacing it with a constant, gnawing fear. It's still out there, hiding in plain sight, and I know, with a certainty that chills me to the bone, that it's still hunting me. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the story and want to hear more tales from the shadows, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Stay safe out there, and always check who or what is standing next to you. The neon glow of Las Vegas is a lie. It promises life, luck, and endless parties. But just a few miles out, the desert tells a different story. It's a place of profound silence, ancient secrets, and things that have walked the sands long before the first casino was ever built. My story begins on a lonely stretch of highway, somewhere between the city's false dawn and the true, unforgiving wilderness of Nevada. I was driving back from a late-night gig in a dusty, forgotten town. My name is Leo, and I'm a musician. Or at least, I was trying to be. That night, the pay was bad, and the crowd was worse. All I wanted was to get back to my cheap motel room on the outskirts of Vegas. The clock on my dashboard read to 17 a.m. The road was empty, a black ribbon unfurling under my headlights. The only sound was the hum of my engine and a sad song on the radio. That's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was a coyote, its eyes catching the light at the edge of the road. But it was too big. Why too big? It stood on its hind legs, its silhouette unnaturally tall and thin against the starry sky. Primera slowed down, my heart starting to thrum a nervous beat against my ribs. It wasn't a man, and it wasn't any animal I'd ever seen. Its limbs were too long, its posture all wrong. It moved with a jerky, unsettling grace, like a puppet being pulled by unseen strings. As I got closer, my headlights washed over it. It had coarse, dark fur, but its face was horrifyingly human-like. The eyes, though, were what truly scared me. They were not the reflective green of an animal. Very dark, intelligent, and filled with a kind of ancient, predatory hunger. It watched me, unblinking, as I drove past. A cold dread, colder than any desert night, washed over me. I pressed my foot on the gas, not daring to look in my rearview mirror. I just drove, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, until the distant lights of Vegas felt like a safe harbor. I tried to forget it. I told myself it was a trick of the light, a hallucination brought on by exhaustion. Vegas is full of strange sights, right? But the image of that thing was burned into my mind. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those dark, hungry eyes staring back at me. The next few days were a blur of anxiety. I started noticing things. A strange scratching sound outside my motel room door late at night. The feeling of being watched as I walked down the street, even in broad daylight. I'd catch glimpses of movement in my peripheral vision, a tall, shadowy figure ducking behind a building or disappearing into an alleyway. I was becoming paranoid, jumpy. My friends, the few I had in the city, told me I was just stressed. It's Vegas, man, they'd say. The city gets to you. But I knew it was more than that. This feeling was primal. It was the feeling of being hunted. One evening, desperate for a distraction, I took a walk through an older, quieter part of the city, far from the glitz of the Strip. I ended up in a small, dusty shop that sold Native American crafts and artifacts. An old man with a kind, wrinkled face sat behind the counter, polishing a silver bracelet. I don't know why, but I felt compelled to talk to him. I described what I had seen in the desert, my voice trembling. I expected him to laugh, to dismiss me as another crazy tourist. Divente. His expression grew serious, his eyes dark with a knowledge I couldn't comprehend. He put down the bracelet and looked at me, really looked at me. You did not see an animal, he said, his voice a low whisper. You saw something that should not be seen. Ayi Naldlushi. I didn't understand the word. He explained it was from the old language of his people, the Navajo. It meant, by means of it, it goes on all fours. A malevolent shaman who'd achieved the power to transform into an animal by breaking a deep cultural taboo. He told me they were creatures of immense power, masters of mimicry and deceit. They coveted the human form, and they were drawn to those who saw them. It knows you saw it, the old man said, his words sending a fresh wave of terror through me. It is curious. It is toying with you, but its curiosity will soon turn to hunger. He told me they could mimic any sound, any voice. They could call your name in the voice of a loved one to lure you into the darkness. They could appear as an animal, or as a twisted hybrid of man and beast. And the worst part? Looking one directly in the eyes was an invitation. It bound you to it. I left the shop with my blood running cold. Everything made a terrifying kind of sense now. The scratching at my door, the feeling of being watched, the shadowy figure I kept seeing. It wasn't paranoia. It was real. That night, the true horror began. I was in my motel room, the door locked, the cheap chain latched. I had a chair propped under the handle, just in case. Around 3 a.m., I heard a faint tapping on the window. Tap. 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 My heart leaped into my throat. My room was on the 2nd floor. There was no balcony, no ledge, nothing to stand on. I stayed frozen on my bed, staring at the window. The tapping stopped. Then, a voice whispered my name from right outside the glass. Leo. It was a perfect imitation of my mother's voice. A voice I hadn't heard in years since she passed away. Leo, let me in. Honey, I'm cold. Tears sprang to my eyes. A mix of grief and pure, undiluted fear. I knew it wasn't her. It couldn't be, but the mimicry was so perfect, so full of love and concern, that for a split second, my heart ached to believe it. Go away, I whispered. My voice choked. The voice changed. Now it was my best friend, Mark, from back home. Dude, open up. It's me. I came all this way to surprise you. The cheerful, familiar tone was a chilling contrast to the impossible situation. I could hear the faint sound of scratching on the glass, like fingernails dragging down the pane. I pulled the covers over my head like a child, my body shaking uncontrollably. The voices continued for what felt like an eternity, cycling through people I knew, people I loved. Each one was a perfect copy, a psychological torture designed to break me down, to make me open that door or that window. Finally, the voices stopped. Silence descended again, thick and heavy. I lay there for hours, not daring to move, until the first rays of dawn crept through the curtains. When I finally found the courage to look, there was nothing there. But on the outside of the window, etched into the dusty glass, were long, deep scratch marks. I knew I couldn't stay in Vegas. The old man had warned me. The Skinwalker was tied to this land. My only chance was to leave, to put as much distance between myself and that desert as possible. I packed my few belongings in a frenzy, my hands shaking so badly I could barely zip my suitcase. I didn't even check out. I just threw the keycard on the bed and ran. As I drove out of the city, I kept my eyes glued to the road ahead. I refused to look in my rearview mirror. But as the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the desert floor, I saw it again. It was running alongside my car, keeping pace effortlessly. It was on all fours this time, but its form was distorted, its movements fluid and unnatural, like a nightmare come to life. Its long, lanky limbs ate up the ground, and for a terrifying moment, its head turned, and those same intelligent, hungry eyes met mine in the side view mirror. I screamed and slammed my foot on the accelerator. The engine roared, and I pushed the car as fast as it would go. The speedometer needle trembled past 100. The creature kept pace for a few more miles, a dark, relentless shadow in the corner of my eye. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, it veered off, disappearing back into the vast, empty expanse of the desert. I didn't stop driving for 16 hours. I drove until the desert was a distant memory, until the landscape turned green and unfamiliar. I've never been back to Las Vegas. I probably never will. I still have nightmares. Sometimes, late at night, when the wind howls just right, I think I hear a faint scratching at my window, or a whisper, calling my name in a voice I know and love. I don't know if it followed me, or if the memory is just so deeply ingrained in my soul that I can never truly escape it. All I know is that there are things in the empty places of the world that are older and more terrifying than any story can describe. And if you ever find yourself driving through the desert late at night, and you see something on the side of the road that doesn't look quite right, just keep driving. Don't slow down, and whatever you do, don't look it in the eyes. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more Tales from the Dark. Stay safe out there. The dust storms around Lubbock have a way of playing tricks on your eyes. You see shapes in the swirling red dirt, things that aren't there. At least, that's what I used to tell myself. My name is Jacob, and I spent my whole life in a small town, just a stone's throw from the city. A place where everyone knows everyone, and nothing ever really happens. Or so I thought. It all started with the livestock. Old man Hemlock, who owned the biggest ranch on the outskirts of town, started losing cattle. Not one or two, but half a dozen in a single week. There were no tracks, no signs of a struggle, just gone. The sheriff chalked it up to clever rustlers. But the old-timers, the ones who'd lived on that land for generations, started whispering an old word. One I had heard since I was a kid trying to scare my friends around a campfire. I laughed it off. We were in West Texas, not some ancient tribal land deep in the desert. But then, the disappearances got closer to town. People's dogs started vanishing from their own backyards. Securely fenced, locked gates. It didn't matter. One night, you'd hear a frantic bark, a sudden yelp, and then silence. The next morning, the gate would be unlatched, the collar lying on the ground, and the dog would be gone. The silence that followed was the worst part. It was a heavy, watchful silence that settled over our town like a shroud. My own encounter happened on a Tuesday night. I was driving home late from my job in Lubbock. The highway, a lonely ribbon of asphalt cutting through the dark plains. My headlights sliced through the blackness, illuminating nothing but endless cotton fields. Suddenly, something darted across the road, right in front of my truck. I slammed on the brakes, my heart leaping into my throat. It was huge, much larger than a coyote or a stray dog. It moved on all fours, but with a strange, unnatural gait. It was lean and emaciated, its skin stretched tight over its bones, and its fur was a patchy, sickly gray. But the eyes are what I'll never forget. They caught the light of my headlights and glowed with a terrifying, intelligent yellow. It wasn't the dumb, reflective shine of an animal. It was a glare, a cold, calculating glare that seemed to look right through me. It paused for a second in the middle of the road, tilted its head as if studying me, and then vanished into the darkness on the other side. I sat there for a full minute, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I tried to rationalize it. A deer? A sick coyote with magic, but nothing fit. The way it moved, the intelligence in its eyes. It was wrong. When I finally got home, I locked every door and window. My German shepherd, Duke, whining and pacing nervously by my side. He could feel it too. The air was thick with a primal fear. The next day, the story was all over town. Sarah, the waitress at the local diner, had seen it too. She described the exact same creature, the same sickly form, the same intelligent eyes. She'd seen it in her backyard, standing perfectly still by her daughter's swing set, just watching the house. She'd screamed, and it had simply turned and loped away into the shadows. The sheriff was getting frustrated, telling everyone it was just mass hysteria fueled by local legends. But we knew what we were seeing wasn't just an animal. The fear in town became a physical thing. No one went out after dark. The usual hum of evening activity was replaced by an eerie quiet. The only sounds were the wind whistling through the screen doors and the distant, lonely cry of a train. We were prisoners in our own homes, held captive by a nameless dread. One evening, I was sitting in my living room, the TV on for background noise, when Duke started growling. It wasn't his usual someone's at the door bark. This was a low, guttural growl that vibrated through the floorboards. The hair on his back was standing straight up, and his eyes were fixed on the back window that looked out onto the empty field behind my house. I muted the TV and listened. Nothing. Just the wind. I tried to calm Duke down, but he wouldn't stop. He was backing away from the window, his body trembling. Then I heard it. A faint scratching sound. It was coming from the back door. Scratch, scratch. It sounded like long nails dragging slowly down the wood. My blood ran cold. I grabbed the heavy iron poker from the fireplace and crept towards the door. Duke was beside me, teeth bared, letting out a series of ferocious barks. Through the small peephole, all I could see was darkness. Then, a voice whispered from the other side. "Jacob." I froze. It was a dry, raspy whisper that sounded like dead leaves scraping across pavement. "Eat, know my name." How could it know my name? "Let me in, Jacob." The voice was distorted, thin, like it was being forced through a throat not meant for human speech. "It's so cold out here." My mind was screaming. This couldn't be happening. I backed away from the door, pulling Duke with me. The scratching stopped. A moment of silence passed, and then a loud thud hit the door, as if something heavy had thrown itself against it. Duke went ballistic, barking and snarling. Then another thud, harder this time, making the whole door frame rattle. I retreated further into the house, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. The thudding continued, each impact more violent than the last. Then came a new sound, a splintering, cracking noise. It was tearing the door apart. I ran to my bedroom and barricaded the door with a dresser, my hands fumbling with the weight of it. I could hear the back door finally give way with a sickening crunch of wood. Then, silenced again. A heavy, predatory silence that was far more terrifying than the noise. I could hear it moving inside my house. The soft, deliberate patting of feet on the hardwood floor. But it wasn't 4 feet. It was 2. It was walking upright. I heard it move through the kitchen, the clink of a glass being knocked over. It was exploring, hunting. Duke had gone quiet, and a new wave of terror washed over me. I prayed he was just hiding. The footsteps stopped outside my bedroom door. I held my breath, listening. I could hear sniffing, a wet, guttural sound right at the crack of the door. It was smelling for me. Then, the doorknob began to turn, slowly, deliberately. The barricade held, but I could hear the wood of the door groaning under an immense pressure. A low, frustrated growl echoed from the other side, a sound that was part animal, part something else entirely. Suddenly, the pressure stopped. I heard the footsteps move away, back towards the front of the house. A minute later, I heard my front door open and close, and then nothing. The silence returned, deeper and more absolute than before. I stayed hidden in that room until the first rays of dawn crept through the blinds. I never saw Duke again. All I found was his collar, lying in the middle of the living room floor, right where the thing had stood. I moved out of that town the next week. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. I just packed my things and drove, not stopping until the plains of West Texas were a distant memory in my rearview mirror. Some people might say it was just a wild animal, a figment of a town's collective imagination, but I know what I heard. I know the sound of its voice, a chilling mimicry of human speech, and I know the intelligent, hateful yellow of its eyes. It wasn't just an animal. It was a predator wearing a disguise, and it was learning E.T. Nume name. And sometimes, in the dead of night, I still wake up from a dream where I hear that dry, rasping whisper calling to me from just outside my window. The forest is a place of secrets, and some are better left undisturbed. My buddy Alex and I learned this the hard way on what was supposed to be a simple weekend camping trip in the deep woods of northern Arizona. We'd been going there since we were kids, and we thought we knew every trail, every sound, every shadow. We were wrong. It was our first night, the fire crackling and spitting sparks into the vast, star-filled sky. The air was crisp, the smell of pine and damp earth filling our lungs. We were just settling down with some hot coffee when a twig snapped in the darkness just beyond the firelight. It wasn't the sound of a deer or a squirrel. It was heavy, deliberate. We both froze our eyes glued to the wall of black trees. A figure stepped into the light. He wore the familiar uniform of a park ranger, the khaki shirt, the wide-brimmed hat, the badge that glinted in the firelight. But something was immediately off. His movements were stiff, almost unnatural, like someone trying to remember how to walk. His smile was too wide, stretching his face in a way that didn't reach his eyes. His eyes, they were dark, empty pits that seemed to swallow the firelight. "Evening, fellas," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rasp. It sounded like it was being scraped over rocks. Just doing my nightly rounds, making sure everyone's safe. We exchanged a nervous glance. We'd never seen a ranger patrol this deep into the woods, especially not this late. "Everything's good here, officer," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, just enjoying the quiet. The ranger's smile widened even more, a predatory grin. He took a step closer, his gaze sweeping over our small campsite. "Just the two of you out here?" he asked, his head tilting at an odd angle. "Yeah, just us," Alex replied, shifting uncomfortably. The ranger nodded slowly, a rhythmic, mechanical motion. "Good, good. And who else came with you?" I blinked, confused. "What? Nobody. I just told you, it's just us." His dark eyes fixed on me, unblinking. "No one followed you. No one knows you're here." The question hung in the air, cold and menacing. A shiver traced its way down my spine. Why would a ranger ask that? It felt less like a question of safety and more like an interrogation. "Our families know we're here," Alex said, his voice tight. "They know our route." The ranger let out a short, dry chuckle that sounded like stones grinding together. "Has anything learned your names yet?" The question hit me like a physical blow. "Learnt our names?" The hair on my arm stood straight up. This wasn't a ranger. This was something else. Something ancient and wrong. I could feel a primal fear clawing its way up my throat, a terror I'd never known before. My mind screamed at me to run, but my body was frozen in place. I could see the same fear reflected in Alex's wide eyes. We were trapped, held captive by this thing's unnerving presence. I couldn't bring myself to speak, so I just shook my head slowly. The thing in the ranger's uniform seemed pleased by this. His smile finally relaxed, but the expression that replaced it was even more unsettling, a look of cold, calculating hunger. He took another stiff step, this time towards the thick brush at the edge of our campsite, the opposite direction from which he'd appeared. "Well," he rasped, his back now to us, "you enjoy your night. Stay safe." He didn't turn around. He just walked straight into the dense, tangled undergrowth where there was no path. We watched, paralyzed, as the bushes swallowed him. We waited, straining our ears for the sound of him walking away, for the snap of another twig, for anything. There was only silence, the kind of absolute, profound silence. It feels heavy and suffocating. He just walked into the brush and vanished. He never came out the other side. We didn't sleep that night. We kept the fire blazing, jumping at every rustle of leaves, every hoot of an owl. The forest no longer felt like a sanctuary. It felt like a cage, and we knew we weren't alone in it. We kept glancing at the spot where he'd disappeared, half expecting to see those empty eyes staring back at us from the darkness. At the first hint of dawn, we threw our gear into our packs and practically ran the entire way back to the trailhead. We didn't stop. We didn't look back. The feeling of being watched was a physical weight on our shoulders. When we finally reached the ranger station at the park entrance, we burst through the door, breathless and frantic. An older, arrogant-faced ranger looked up from his desk, his expression shifting from surprise to concern. We spilled the whole story, the words tumbling out of us, the late-night visit, the strange questions, the way he walked, the way he disappeared. The real ranger listened patiently, his brow furrowed. When we finished, he leaned back in his chair and let out a long sigh. He looked at us with a deep, weary sadness in his eyes. "Sons," he said, his voice gentle, "I understand you're spooked, but you must have been mistaken. Maybe it was another camper playing a prank." "No," I insisted. "He was wearing a uniform, a badge. He said he was on patrol." The ranger shook his head slowly. "That's impossible." He gestured around the small office. "It's just me and a part-timer, and she went home with the flu yesterday afternoon. I was here all night, manning the radio." He paused, letting his words sink in. "There was no one on duty in the park last night. No one at all." A cold dread washed over me, far worse than the fear I'd felt by the fire. We showed him on the map where we had been camping. He stared at the spot for a long moment, his face grim. He told us that area was known for strange occurrences, for disappearances. He spoke in hushed tones of old legends, of beings that could wear the skin of an animal, or even a man. Things that could mimic voices and learn your name, using it to gain power over you. We left that station and never went back. To this day, I can't think about the woods without seeing that wide, unnatural smile and those empty, black eyes. I can still hear that rasping voice asking its terrible questions. We were lucky. We didn't give it our names. I often wonder what would have happened if we had. Some secrets are buried deep in the forest for a reason. Some things are not meant to be found, and some rangers are not rangers at all.